I was invited to tell my story today and hopefully to share a feeling of inspiration to go deeper and believe all the more in the creativity and the uniqueness of your story. But in writing the script for today and writing my speech, I realized it's not my story. It's not about the me, it's the we. Because my story is all the people I've learned from, listened to, read, who existed centuries ago. It's really the community that makes every story, and it's the texture of those shared moments. It's the texture of those histories that create the change we're going to make in the future. It's the texture that creates our personal pathways that leaves change. My name is Dr. Haley Mellin. I am an artist that focuses on painting and large-scale land conservation. And we're going to talk a bit today about how those two things, art and land conservation, creativity and land conservation, interweave. I grew up here in the home of the Coast Miwok and the borders of Point Reyes. I grew up in communities that did not build on their ridgetops, that left those ridgetops so grass could grow because those were sacred Indigenous spaces. They were also corridors for wildlife to migrate. They were spaces of life. And so when you looked up all around the towns, you saw life. And I thought as a young person, what exceptional forethought that people planned and people took care. And my best friends were roly-polies and snails and slugs. They were small insects, and I would watch their little worlds. And I thought, I'm part of this world. And as I grew, my parents lived lives of service. They support emotional and mental health, planetary well-being. And my dad would have us volunteer on the weekends. Here I am doing a coastal cleanup with my friend Kathy Fong, picking up garbage. And then when I was 13, my mother gifted me my first box set of watercolors and took me to the Mendocino Arts Center, took me to a life drawing class. I had never seen a naked person. I had never drawn from life, and my goodness, that was a day my life changed. When in doubt, sign up for life drawing. And so from there, I moved into high school and I took night classes at the local community college in Native American Studies. And my dad said I had two books on my bookshelf. One was on Van Gogh's paintings and another was Wildlands Philanthropy. And by the time I was in my early 20s, I knew I wanted to conserve land. I didn't know what that meant. I still not sure if I know what that means, but I knew I wanted to conserve land. And I knew I wanted to focus on community, because by then I had learned that land conservation begins and is of community. Indigenous-led land conservation, community-led land conservation, locally-led land conservation is the heart of how anything can be possible in this space. And my community were artists. So I knew I wanted to support the cultural community in learning, supporting, being with land conservation. So I began maybe 20 years of study and research, learning, listening. One of my first conservation advisors actually was a teacher here, because I got to study here. My parents and grandparents went to Berkeley. Dr. John Hurst, and he said, show up for your education, participate in your education. Co-create your education, demand your education. So some of my education was in meeting people and reading and learning about laws and learning about what doesn't work. And some of it was outside, painting. And one of the first things I learned in painting, because I'm an observational painter, which means I sit and I slowly look and I watch what's in front of me and I try to record what I see. And when you're recording, trying to paint, trying to draw a living thing, my goodness, all else falls away. And you are decentered. You are not the most important thing in the center. Like Elaine Scarry's book on beauty and being just, she was decentered by seeing a small moth. Something else becomes more important. And in that space, I saw, we are nature, I am nature. I'm not looking at it, I'm not visiting it, I'm not stewarding it, I'm not supporting it. I am nature. This was a painting that was made in a cloud forest, mist all around, it's in progress here. And about 20 hours later, I was nearly done with the painting, and suddenly the surface starts dripping down. The full painting is sliding down the surface because of the amount of moisture in the air. And at that moment, the painting was done. Nature is the artist. We are nature. Nature is the artist. And so my paintings today tend to be slow meditations. This painting's about 300 hours of time. They're about looking, they're about paying homage, being with something. And after many years of work, it was time. And it was time to found Art into Acres. So in 2017, I founded Art into Acres as a 501c3 to support the cultural community, museums, artists, anyone who wanted to pick up a brush in supporting some of the most important biodiversity, land-back, Indigenous-led projects on the planet. How does that work? How does an artwork protect a forest? Well, oftentimes, because of how much we value art, something this size can go to support and protect, maybe something 2 feet, let's call it 2 by 2 feet, can go to support and protect hundreds of thousands of acres of land. But it doesn't do it alone. It does it with handshakes with foundations, with partners such as local nonprofits, Indigenous leadership, community, associations. And Art into Acres at present usually tries to pay for about half of the cost of a project. What is my role in that? Well, I'm a elbow, I'm a synapse. I support my fellow artists in that process of deciding to donate. I support fellow foundations, fellow friends, someone who has $11 and they say, I want to do this project. I support education. And my goodness, what a rewarding role to play. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the land conservation tenets. Great land conservation always begins at home. It begins with the people who know the landscape. It begins with the people who know how it smells, who have lived there for centuries, who are advocates for the land being protected. Those are the leaders. So Indigenous and locally led land conservation is exceptionally important, and that is what we aim to support. Also in community, we have biodiversity and beta diversity. Art into Acres supports high biodiverse areas. Biodiversity is most acutely concentrated near our equatorial belts, where the tropical forests are. And Paul Hawkins said in his book, Drawdown, one of the top 5 ways to protect, balance, and support our climate is to conserve tropical forests. Beta diversity is actually a very new term. It's a term I love. And beta diversity is the web of life. Imagine the web of life stacked. So imagine 8 webs of life stacked, where any point has 8 other species that do the same job, do the same role. So there's redundancy. So if an animal leaves, another's there to take up its position. It creates an exceptionally resilient community, and we need that resilience for our future. There's very few beta diverse places on Earth. Mount Kilimanjaro is one, the Andes are one. We try to conserve these areas first. During some years, we were working, talking, and said, how do we protect? Where do we protect? How do we engage to get the most species supported? And this paper came forward, Conservation Imperatives. I was proud to co-author it last summer. I recommend you all read it. And what we found is 1% of the Earth's surface supports essentially about 80% or more of unprotected species. This is based on the species rarity layer from the Global Safety Net. And I recommend you read more, look more at the globalsafetynet.app/viewer. So it's amazing now we know where biodiversity is. There's about 16,000 sites globally, 1.2% of our Earth's surface that we need to focus on. And we're going to get to work and try to do that together. The majority of these sites are Indigenous. Brings us to intact forest landscapes. One of the focuses of our acres is intact forest landscapes. These are areas that are 125,000 acres or larger. And we want this intactness. We want these areas without roads. We want these areas that are very, very wild because they support large mammal health in terms of reproduction. So you have a healthy genome sequence. We want to support those intact forest landscapes. If this interests you, please read Dr. Tom Lovejoy's book, Evergreen. And this leads us to what we're doing, which is creating permanent protected areas. What is a permanent protected area? It's an area that is sort of an unravelable web in terms of protection. It's not just protected for the next 5 years. It's protected for generations and generations to come. Now, no two conservation projects are the same. Everything's different because it's being created by the people who live in a place. And so the actual fabric of that protection changes. But what's important is that it remains. And lastly, participatory. This is the last point I'd like to bring up. It's important we can all do this work. It's important it's not for some of us. Some of the projects you're going to see today are 23 cents an acre. That's something we can all show up for. If it's work you want to do, please reach out. So I'd like to tell 4 stories today, share the beauty of four places, our sister places. And this is the first project that Art into Acres ever supported, the Northern Highlands of Guatemala. Still in progress, 38,000 acres, over 30 artists supported in conjunction with the Chef Sangrio Foundation, and so many conservation partners on the ground. This is an indigenous territory. It's the last unconserved cloud forest in northern Central America. Cloud forests get 2 inches of rain a day. And this forest is exceptional. It climbs up to 8,000 feet. And so when I'm there, I wear every coat I have because you're wet and you're cold for as long as you're there. This is a high biodiverse area, and it's actually the bird species that brought in the first conservation support because Dr. Phil Tanimoto read a paper. Scientific papers are so important to conservation. And he noted that there were 720 resident bird species. That's unheard of. You know, I grew up, there's maybe 40. And so the birds, look at the color of that bird, brought in the first conservation support. And here you have that same color in Rigoberta Menchú, the 1991 Nobel Peace Prize winner. She grew up at the base of the forest. And here she is, on behalf of her foundation, advocating for the protection of her homeland. And she's joined side by side with Marco Cerezo, the executive director of Fund Echo. It shows the way that conservation nonprofits and indigenous groups start to support each other, work hand in hand. Many of the people living around the forest don't write, and so they sign all the documents with their hands. And this is one of the most treasured pictures I own because you see everyone's presence, you see their participation, you see their fingerprints, you see them showing up to protect their historic homestead. And this is how an agreement's made. Now, this was supported by a range of artists. We have Rashid Johnson, who has an exhibition coming up at the Guggenheim. Zaria Foreman, who's one of our great draftswomen in glacier drawings. She's about to head to Greenland to make her biggest drawing yet, 30 feet. Tiffany Bozick, who lives near here in Larkspur, California. Tiffany's one of our great species painters. Her partner is a curator at the California Academy of Sciences. And a new painting that Isabella Kirkland's just working on this week, and Isabella Kirkland's a big sister of Bioneers. She lives over across the bay in Sausalito. So those are just some of the many minds, along with all of the effort on the ground to go forward. Now, this is a long-term project. In fact, we're at present trying to support the creation of a new law in Guatemala so that this area could be the first ever national indigenous protected area of the country. There's much more work to do. Another story I'd like to share is the Choco in Colombia, the wettest forest in the Americas. Here it is. And this project just got finished last year after 7 years of work. And I so love the photos that show the community in determining their own borders, and deciding where the conservation is going to happen on behalf of themselves and the biodiversity that populates these forests. You can see here a purple line and a black line during a 2-year debate as to where the boundaries were going to be. And it was a very slow process because you have 40,000 people living in 1.5 million acres of land. So just to have these meetings, just to have these conversations takes quite a lot of travel. But you know, step by step, when conservation happens, it's slow, but it gets there. And it gets there because it's the right thing to do. In fact, not one of the projects that Art into Acres has supported has not completed into fruition. None of them have stopped. They're either in progress or all the way done. And the purpose here is very simple. It's a very Zen activity. You don't change anything on the ground. You don't add anything. You make a little invisible line on a map. You make a drawing. That's what you do after all the years of work, meetings, legal meetings. And you make a line on the map so that people can continue to live the life they've always lived. This place was the first location that one artist supported. This is the artist Jonas Wood in his studio in Los Angeles. And this painting supported 4 different locations. Next, we're bringing us closer to home. The creation last year of Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument, 14,000 acres, led by the Yertadihi Wintun Nation and the Patwin people. This is an exceptional expansion of a monument that Obama made. And it is also a connectivity corridor to a private conservation area called Wilbur Hot Springs. This is a community effort in every sense of the word. Here you have town hall meetings. There was efforts to bring the BLM director out. There were so many walks. The space kept on getting bigger each year. And here you have sense of the conversation. It did not pass Congress, and so it was brought forward into conservation through an act of the Antiquities, through a signature of President Biden last summer. The art funds supported the lobbying, the legal analysis, the strategy, and the advocacy, brilliantly shepherded by Kai Anderson. He's a great friend of conservation. He's based in DC. He runs Cassidy Associates. And he really just is a great mind of how do we bring in different efforts, different people, different communities into a final protected area. He's also engaged by 2 artists, Dustin Yellen, Maisha Mohammadi, and matched by the Thriving Futures Foundation. Tuliomi, which is the local nonprofit there, run by Sandy Schuber, just did such a beautiful job with grassroots organizing, and it was a real labor of love. So we want to celebrate this area. And the last story today is one that just came out last week. This is deeply moving. This is the first ever protected area for uncontacted people. People were isolated. They're isolated people. First ever in the country of Colombia, 2.7 million acres. So proud of that country for doing this, for stepping up. And you know what? When there's a first, there can be a second. So one of the big things is to pave the way for the next. This is the press release while it was still in draft form. It wasn't ready yet, so I screenshot what I had to show you. And this largely was a pretty affordable grant, and it mainly paid for the drone overflights, the technology to see where people were without disturbing them. So the purpose of this protected area is so that these humans can live there forever in peace and choose if they want contact, not have contact done to them. Yeah. And part of the technology supported camera traps to see what sort of biodiversity was present. And you see this one says 2018. This was many, many years of research to get a sense of what's living here. What is living here? How do we support it? So thank you to the government for this new action. So to conclude today, it really is community. It's community that makes land conservation possible. And it's people speaking up, saying this needs to happen, and learning together and working together and asking questions together. Land conservation is something we should all talk about. And we're going to get better at it. Here you have the artist Beeple, who supported that area, of great digital artists of our time. And now 8 years since we started Art into Acres, the cultural community, the matching funds partners, people who gave $11 have supported over 75 million acres of land conservation. And I just want to say thank you. It's been a real honor. It's been a real treat. We make these dreams in our worlds, and then we create our dreams. We make them reality. So thank you.